information wrong. We'll start.
And before we do that, do you mind if I insert another quick thought in?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you'd allow us maybe just a little quick short opening comment too,
Oh,
along
sure.
with the
Yeah,
introduction, because I think just
About
watching what
authentic
we just
confidence
saw, you know,
Yeah.
might.
Yeah, I would love it. So please introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background, and then if you have any kind of thoughts from based on what you saw or ideas about the general topic of authentic confidence, please feel free to share that with us as well.
Okay, hello. My name is Bolden. Almost like Geronimo without the mo. And, it's the easiest way to get people to remember. But anyway, I'm just happy to be here discussing confidence with you all because I know what it really takes to have confidence. I've really struggled and pushed through a situation. Me and my son were actually homeless for almost 2 years. And because of that and trying to create job opportunities for myself, I really took a beat down. I was in a low valley and I really didn't know how to come out of it. And I had to build confidence in myself. And it's funny when you have to do that and you go to a level of being low because I didn't think I needed confidence. I had it. I assumed I was. I mean, I was the top of what I was doing. I was moving forward in education. I was a single mother. That didn't seem to stop me at all, like financially. But when I got to that low point, I realized I didn't have confidence in myself. And most importantly, I realized I didn't know myself. So that's kind of a little bit with that. When we were, what she was talking about, I've actually been through this process that you guys are going through and learning about vulnerability and just how important it is. You will be surprised in the line of business that I do. I'm an image consultant. But in the line of business that I do, women that are CEOs or high executives that don't have confidence. And we as women, we really try to, this is who I am, this is how I've been all my life, regardless of the truth, regardless of any testimony behind that, this is who I am, and then we present that and we move forward. Instead of coping, dealing, expressing, talking, valuing it, and then transitioning. And so that's what I had to learn to do, particularly with that class in vulnerability. So thank you.
Yeah. she's in our full series.
Yeah.
Which the last class is tomorrow. Yes. And we've just been so impressed with Geronimo. So
yeah, so it's that piece, but anyway, I'm the business owner of Icon LLC. I am an image consultant. I actually get the privilege of going around and talking to women and youth females about the importance of having a professional image. And I get to live it through my personal example and how I did it. So that's really what I do. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Geronimo.
I just lost confidence.
I was confident.
Anyway, Tonya Egan, and I think by now I know many of you, but always have had my career in nonprofit organizations, and I think, authentic confidence, I love this topic, and it's like a national buzzword right now for women in general, because so often we were taught, I guess, or bought into the facade, as I call it. And I think for myself, it's just a really core thing. It's a value I try to embrace the best I can. And I think it also means it's a value that, in the hardest of times in life is when you're really tested. That's when your true character is shown, when you face adversity. So for me, whenever there's times of adversity, I think to myself, be authentic. Don't put on the face or don't put on a show. Just be real and let people know, some days life can't, always be a perfect little package with a bow on it. And I've been amazed that when I've done that in those moments, how real other people get. So I think it's like giving permission to people to be real. And that's the gift we can give ourselves and others. I think Brene Brown says one of the greatest gifts you can give as a leader is to give and receive vulnerability. And you can't receive it without giving it. You can't expect people to be real with you if you're not real with them. And so for me, that's just been a real blessing. And but it's tough to do it. And I think some people question it for sure. And they say, well, why do you let people know that? Why don't you hide that? Or you shouldn't tell people that. And, you know, and that's their issue, you know, I mean, that's their insecurity, or they're not willing to live the real deal. But sometimes it can weigh on you and you think, oh yeah, was I a fool to be vulnerable, you know? But at the end of the day, I sleep better at night, you know, if I'm just who I am. And I hope that other people will be the same with me. So that's what it means to me, I guess, is standing in your truth, and being real.
Thank you, Tanya.
So I'm Pat Wachtel, and we've seen each other before, so I don't think I need to tell you as much about my background. But I was really struck by this diagram that you just looked at, because I think it's one of the two things you really need to know to be a leader. You know, one of them is, because underlying that,
Do you want me to turn it back on?
no, it's okay. I think they remember it. But you know, underlying that, you have to have the understanding that leaders lead with the permission of the followers. You know, if you look behind you and there's nobody following you, you are not a leader. You know, and so, you know, that's kind of test one. And there's two critical components to achieving that. One of them is knowing what you own and knowing what you don't own, which is what you just said. And I don't think you have to go to people and say, wow, I'm really terrible. Like, Jennifer is our technology manager here. She's part of our management team and a very valuable part of it. I don't know everything about technology, and I'm the CEO. You know, if I was in one of those wrong quadrants, I'd be smacking her down all the time. Well, I know better than you what we should be doing with this. Well, the truth is I don't. And I don't have to know. And in fact, if I have to know everything, I don't need a Jennifer or a Liz or the other people working here. I'll just run the whole show by myself and I'll be the show. You know, but the fact is no one can do that. And you know, the faster you accept that and know that it's okay for you to just know what you own and what you don't own, and real leaders then look for what they don't own in other people, and then they trust them to bring it. You know, which is where Jennifer comes in, and Joy and Latasha and you know, the other people on our team. Because we need expertise to be successful. So my job as a leader, looked at properly, is to know what we've got in our leadership group and then figure out what's missing, if anything. Right now I'd say nothing. I'm so excited about that. But you know, but that might be just a little arrogant on my part. I can own that too. But you know, it's knowing what we need and what we have, and then you know, if I'm doing it right, and you all can tell me later, you too, you know, if this is true or not. It is my job to call out the best in other people, and to try to do that by being the best that I can be, but allowing them to be their best in their own space. And if we all succeed in doing that, then we have an unbeatable team. And so anyway, that's just kind of, I was thinking all that when I was watching your diagram and going, wow, that diagram just really nails it. So you know, if you look at that and then think about your own abilities, and also you talked about character, that's huge. You know, the leader in an organization sets the tone of the organization, whether they mean to or not. You know, my value system and how I behave has everything to do with what goes on here, you know, and we've actually tested that with some silly experiments from time to time that I won't take the time to tell you about. But you know, that I think is you know, just sort of an opening comment in terms of leadership and what I'm just validating everything you just heard, because I think what you just saw was really important.
Well, Pat, I'll go right back to you. One of the things that we have been talking about a lot, or that has come up a lot, is this idea of comparison, and how comparison affects the level of authentic confidence. So when you think about what happens when you try to be someone that you're not, what happens when you are comparing yourself and then letting that affect either how you approach the world or how you look at yourself. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, in fact, you know, that reminds me of a poem that a friend of mine wrote at Butler many years ago, you can tell. I don't even remember the whole poem, but the title of it was In Defense of Jenny. And the last line of his poem was, the fastest race is with yourself. The fastest race is with yourself. So if you are a person who is always looking at what everybody else has, you know, what everybody else is doing, you're not focused on the right thing. Because you know what? There are people out there that are smarter than all of us. Give them that right away. There are people that are prettier than us. There are people that are more confident than us. There are people that have different gifts that are better than the ones we have. So what? That shouldn't matter to us, because all of us have been given gifts that we are supposed to use, you know, for the benefit of ourselves and our families, for the benefit of our communities. you know, it is not your job to worry about how somebody else is using their gifts, except if you're the right kind of person to say, yeah, you go, girl. Okay?
Right.
You know, but it is more important to think about how are you using what's been given to you. You know, and if you do that, then you are racing with yourself constantly, and that's where you should be, because constant comparison is always going to leave you unhappy and dissatisfied, because, you know, there's going to be somebody out there every day. Every day I see women that have it all over me, you know. You know what? But that doesn't upset me. It inspires me.
Right.
You know.
Right.
It inspires me, and I'm happy for my sisters that do well, and we should all be, because you know that's the right place to come from. So part of it is that, and the other part of it is if you allow yourself into that negative space of, oh, well, that person was you know, I had this happen to me as a young manager. I'll give you an example. When I was a banker, I was a bank manager, and I had a young man who was my first assistant manager. It was my first real management job, not just supervision. And he kept coming in every day with really good ideas. Well, let's try this and let's try that. And, you know, I started to feel really threatened by that. Because I would go home at night thinking, why didn't I think of that? Wow, that was really smart. You know, and it made me tense. And I started to dislike him. You know, I did. You know, I was probably about your age. You know, I started really to dislike him. And I finally went home and I had to sit down and really kind of talk to myself, because I realized I wasn't being myself, and I was in this kind of ugly attitude. And I had to think it through, and what I realized was talent is not a zero-sum game. Just because he was smart did not mean I was stupid. Okay, and in my head, I was equating his intelligence with like something that was lacking in me, instead of appreciating that as a manager, I had been given the gift of a very capable assistant that I should have been grateful for. You know, and so I was able to say, you know, once I realized, like, just because he's bright and capable doesn't make me incapable, that changed my whole attitude. And, you know, we're still friends today. And it was a very good working relationship once I understood it isn't my job to think of everything, but it is my job to support good ideas, whoever brings them, you know, and to make sure that we're using the best ideas, because, you know, it wasn't my job to know everything. But it took me a little while to wrap my brain around that, and it'll happen to all of you if it hasn't already. You know, and if you can get yourself to the place of understanding that because someone else is strong and they're a winner, that does not make you a loser. You know, you can both win. And that's better for the world, it's better for the organization, it's better for everything. So, you know, so that's again sort of the, you know, and if somebody outcompetes me at some point fair and square, okay. You know, nobody's given every gift. And it's okay to accept that and to just do the best that you can given what you've been given. And to be happy for others when they do the same thing.
I think that is an incredible point. It is not a zero-sum game. It is absolutely. We are, just because someone is something does not mean we're the opposite. I think that's an incredible point. Tanya or Joanna, any comments about that kind of idea? You don't have to. I just want to give you the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement. And those are some life lessons that if you get early, I wish I would have been invested in, like in high school, right when I was coming to college. That those are the things that I need to be paying attention to, because who knows how much further or my mental potentiality will be going. I mean, it's just, those are lessons. That's very just true. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I like the zero-sum game analogy. That's a good point. Just because someone's good doesn't make me a zero.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So, yeah, I like that.
I was going to say too, as an image consultant, a lot of times some of the things that I do, even in the group workshops that I have a lot of women that I tell them research accountability. One thing I tell them, you know, same thing they tell you if you're a business owner, is to find someone that's in that same business, you know, and research them, what's working. But I tell people in the image world, really not idolizing or looking at it and saying that that's what I want, but how can you turn that into you? Or does it fit? Because you may have thought, I need to be this way, suited up every day, and you're a nurse. You know, but what does that look like? Or what's the goal beyond that? I mean, I don't know. Maybe you're looking to be a chief staff or so, you know. But my point is just really, you know, being realistic about that, and that point just brought that up.
Well, talk to me a little bit then from your personal experience, but also from your professional experience, that getting into that authentic zone. How do you get into that place where it's realistic? You know,
Right.
You're not a nurse wearing a suit to work every day, but but that it feels real, it feels authentic.
And let me start off by really giving my definition of authentic confidence. Because I really assimilate both of the words and break it down. To me, authenticity, a lot of times we do associate it with just being real or fake, but I really think about it as original. It all is about originality. When you start valuing who you are in your essence being, meaning as an individual, you are unique. No matter, just like we just said, no matter what the opposition, no matter what you're facing, no matter what your truth, your testimony, you were designed for a unique purpose. And when you stand in that originality, it's like, that is you. It doesn't matter what the perception is. You know, because I'm an image consultant, I deal a lot with perception. One of the things that first came out when I told my son I was taking a risk to start my business was, Mom, you told me people don't pay attention to the covers of the book. Well, we say that. I had to break it down to him to say, you know, you have goals. In his terms, he was 9 at the time. It's like, okay, you want to be a basketball star, but what does a basketball star do? Who do they hang around? You know, what are some of the images that you're seeing that's completely different from how you would have to be? I mean, it still comes down to a role, but I had to tell him the truth that we are being looked at, and it starts with our coverings, right? Which is our etiquette, right? Our mannerisms, our personalized skills, and then in addition to that, it comes down to our attire and how we look, which is, just to throw this out there, it takes 2 seconds for people to go from a visual assessment of you to literally an opinion that continues to filter from there. Just so that you know that. We moved away from the 30-second to the 10-second to the 2-second. That was free. So that's authenticity. So then courage to me is really, confidence is really courage. And I heard someone, as soon as I came in, which is one of the things I was going to talk about, I was like, oh, that's awesome that we're talking about courage, because there's no way to be vulnerable without that. But then there's no way to gain confidence if you don't own it. There's no way to do it. So when I think about authentic confidence together, I just think about it being originality wrapped wholeheartedly in courage. And you know, courage is derived from a Latin term that means heart. So it really is stepping out. And that's really what it is to me. So when you ask me how to get in that zone of being authentic and confident, I just wrote down some things that I thought was important that I tried to also tell some of the women that I work with, which comes down to, 1, being me clearly. So like, what does that really mean? I'm literally taking the time, I can tell you and attest to this, every morning I have a 5-minute meditation at least. I try to get more if I can, but at least 5 minutes. But then I'm looking directly at myself in the mirror and I'm telling myself what I see. And then I'm addressing it as far as what I want to see. What's that goal? You know what? I am outstanding. And I'm owning that today. So that's a choice. Being me clearly, right? Okay. So then the other thing is a cheering squad. One thing that I got lucky on, I got married last September. I made it through. Tony knows. I remember I was in a class and I'm like, I gotta go. I'm getting
to our seminar the day. She's like, I gotta go. I got a wedding. I'm like, just go.
So I made it through that. But a cheering squad, you know, true partners or people that you can refer to that can give you real feedback, that know you. That's gonna tell you, girl, that is, now you know you weren't supposed to email her that. Or, hey, that was, you know what, that's good. That's not where you wanted to be, but that was a step forward, right? But really making you accountable for who you say that you are. You know, some things that I do with my teeth and my braces, and my husband's like, you're not supposed to eat that. You know, your image consultant, people are gonna see your teeth. And I'm like, what? You know, I have to think about that, and then I say, okay, these are things that I need to be doing. But just little things that just make you really accountable, okay, for being authentic. Because they know you. And then the last thing is boldness. And I know we were talking about the courage, and some people actually mentioned risk-taking. And I'm just a true believer that whenever fear has stepped into me and been like, you know what, don't do it. You're not good enough, and you don't have that, and da-da-da, and you didn't have the education, and you didn't da-da-da-da. Once and every single time I have like, you know what, I'm going to do it. and I do it, it's always something on the other side. A gained sense of confidence. I mean, just a boldness every single time. So when we talk about that, and you know, we get down to that last part, of course, self-affirming yourself, look at yourself in the mirror, being honest with who you are to yourself, because there's no way you can be authentic if you're not being real with who you are inside, right? Which is one of the things I teach a lot of people. You can never put out a professional image if you don't know who you are and have a positive self-esteem inside. It's not possible. People will see that. But my point is that when you think about that and being bold about the risk that you'll take, I am going to step out. I'm going to show people I am a good communicator. I possess that talent. I never talk, but I'm going to do it today. That's a whole nother branch of confidence that you step into. And that is another authentic zone.
Amen.
No, I love it. But part of that boldness is that vulnerability that we're talking about, right? Courageous, being able to step up to that fear and say, you're not going to win today, right? I'm going to do it.
Can I tag on that real quick?
Absolutely.
I just came back from a Girls Inc. National Conference, and the luncheon speaker was Carly Fiorina, who was the CEO of Hewlett Packard, which is a Fortune 50 company. So this is a woman who's really, really been there. Her luncheon speech was amazing because it really was about the inner work of the leader. And she said, everyone is afraid. Everyone. Okay, this is a woman who's been there and done all of that. And she's right, everyone is afraid. You know, and the thing that you have to learn how to do, and you talked about it, you know, but I'll say it another way, tell your gremlins to shut up, you know, at some point. Now you have to have thought it through, you know, do I really know how, I mean, don't go take a risk just to take a risk. But if you've thought it through, you know you can do it, and it's just a matter of facing down that I'm not so sure piece, then you have to find a way to say, okay, those little voices in my head now need to stop talking, you know, because it's my turn and I'm just going to go do it. And then you have to just suck it up and go do it. And it is very empowering, and it will give you more confidence over time to learn how to do that. But
And I was just going to say, because like even in situations where you pret, and all of a sudden you get right to the door to do what you got to do, and I'm scared, and I don't know, you know, it's like but it's a boldness. That's that courage, that's that heart, you know, and you have to be willing to do that. And a lot of times in my image workshops, I ask women, you know, what does courage look like? You know, people think of it as power, success, prestige, but it's all from within.
Yeah, courage is a very personal thing, because what it takes one person to do to be courageous. Some people, to speak in front of a group, that takes courage. For me, that's not courage, but then, you know, maybe swimming in a lake would take a lot of courage. So I mean, courage is a very personal journey, but it's also, last week I was reading this quote, said, you know, courage is a habit that you form by taking, I mean, it's courageous acts. No one is just like hero overnight, really. I mean, it's how they start living. And I thought about early in my career, you know, there were moments, especially earlier in my career, where I didn't I didn't speak up, or I didn't do something that I thought was probably the right thing to do, but I was more afraid of what would others think, or what would my boss say, but by not doing those and having the regrets, it later gave me the strength to step up. If that opportunity came again, it's like, okay, I'm not going to make the same mistake. This time I'm going to say something or do something. And then that act, you know, gave me a new courage. And then the next time something came. So it is a habit that you build. And you build it by facing, you know, fears or pushing yourself out of the comfort zone. One of my little tricks when I'm fearful or going to do something, and stealing from Girls Inc., but I really do, I always take like a really deep breath and say, okay, Tonya, be strong, smart, and bold. And I really think those cover everything. And I've done that now for, you know, since I worked here back in 2001, but that, for me, that is my mantra. Like, it reminds myself, you got to be all those things. And when you think of yourself that way in that moment, it comes across. So.
Well, and Tonya, because specifically I wanted you to talk about that vulnerability piece, and it feels like we're kind of in that space. So when you think about vulnerability and making courage a habit, how does that connect all together in this idea of authentic confidence for you?
Yeah, I personally, I love the topic of vulnerability, but I know it's not something that typically you don't think of vulnerability in leadership. A lot of people think that's like an oxymoron, and that's not possible. And there are people that see it as a weakness, and again, I think that's more their issue, because I think for me, vulnerability takes more strength than to put on a facade. I mean, to put on an act is probably an easier thing to do than to be vulnerable in that space. And, I think that as leaders, for me last year, here I was, CEO of a national women's leadership organization, which of course means I should be upholding the utmost standards of leadership, ethics, excellence, etc. But my father, went to prison for white-collar fraud, and it was in the news, it was in the media all last year, and it was just a really interesting dichotomy to be in, to have someone, being charged by the FBI for federal crimes for stealing innocent people's money, while I'm representing an organization. And so, I worried about it. I talked to my board about it. I talked to the staff, because I thought, okay, what does this mean for me? I have to own the fact that unfortunately my dad is a white-collar criminal and going to prison, and I have to deal with the emotions of that, and the shame, and the embarrassment, and the shock. But at the same time, can I still do this job? Because I am the face of the organization. Thankfully, I had a board that quickly said, but we know you, and you're not your father. And that kind of goes to what Pat, that zero-sum thing. I think even with family, sometimes you think, well, if they're a zero, then I'm a zero. Does the apple not fall far from the tree? And you do worry about, do people think that? And unfortunately, I've learned, yes, some people think that. But again, if you stand in your truth and you own it, I think, one of my favorite country songs is an old song, but I think it was Tanya Tucker, but she says that it's about a tree strong enough to bend. And when I was a teenager and I heard that, I thought, I don't understand how a tree in the backyard has to be strong enough to bend. A strong tree, is like this. But that makes sense. If you appear strong, but you're really not, you're going to snap in the strongest storm. If you're a really strong tree, when those winds start going, to bend. And I've always kind of kept that in mind too, that it doesn't mean I'm not strong just because I have to bend. And when you have to bend or lean into the wind, that is your most vulnerable moment. But that's just what you got to do. And that doesn't mean you're not strong, but you got to realize, or you could break. So you have to be vulnerable, or I think you would break.
So let's flip that around for a second, because I think it's important. I mean, the other choice you could have made would be to try to not deal with it, with your dad, because your last name isn't the same now, and not everybody would know, and you could kind of just sort of just see what happens next. But then you would be worried all the time.
Yes.
All the time.
To be found out.
And it would sap your energy.
Yeah.
And it would, and by facing what is that ugly fear of, will people accept me fairly, understanding I'm not my father, takes some real guts. And you did it really well.
Thank you.
I was proud of you when I watched you do that. But what you found out was, by facing it down, what you were afraid of wasn't so bad. And the other thing for everybody, I think, to think about in this too, is that when you are doing the right thing, and when you are leading from a good place, there are people that find that very threatening.
Oh,
yes.
And some of them will try to hurt you.
yes.
Yeah.
You know what? They are the minority. They're kind of the ugly minority, but they're there. You can't let that stop you. You can't let it slow you down. You can't worry about those people, because the other thing I've seen in a long enough lifetime is that what goes around comes around.
Yeah.
And the people who are the negative people that want to tear others down just to be hurtful, they usually just do something to themselves that trips
Yeah.
them up badly.
Mhm.
I've seen it happen at least 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
And the nice part about it is you don't even have to do anything to them. They do it to
Stand by-
themselves.
yeah, exactly.
So you can just kind of be patient and stand by and kind of keep an eye on things, and over time,
Yeah.
what happens is, they find a way to shoot themselves in the foot. So you don't have to worry about people like that because really they self-eliminate. They do.
Good
And
advice.
trust me, it happens every time.
Good advice, yeah.
And so don't let yourself stoop to their level, don't let them slow you down, and don't worry about them.
Yeah.
The
Because
best thing
they're-
you can do is continue to be confident.
Yeah, and that drives them crazy.
Just
so you know.
you can
Yes.
do.
That's the best thing that you
Success
can
is
do.
the sweetest revenge.
What I wanna do, I wanna,
Can I make another comment just about the vulnerability part real quick?
yes.
I just wanted to say that I was just thinking about a quote that Pastor Rick Warren had said of the purpose-driven life. He was suggesting that he had a pair of jeans, and inside of the jeans there was an inscription on the jeans that said these jeans are intentionally flawed for uniqueness. So when you think about being original and being authentic and being confident, think about being courageous, and then you put all that together, when you get down to the vulnerability point where you have an opportunity to step out courageously, think about that quote. That you are, intentionally flawed for uniqueness. There's power in that. So.
Thank you. I want to open it up to any questions that you all have. You've heard some of their experience, you've heard some really incredible words of wisdom and